March 23rd, 2001. My name is Jerome Perry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. This will be an oral interview with Don Heald, who was a lifelong resident of Linn County and an early aviator, and he took training as a B-26 tail gunner during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Don.
Morning.
Don, tell us when you were born and where you were born.
Okay, born January 31st, 1926, northwest of Whittier, Iowa, rural Linn County.
Was your dad a farmer?
Yeah, Dad farmed, and he farmed it during the Depression, lost it once, bought it back. So our roots were pretty deep there until I went to service when I was 17 years old.
What time or what age would you have been when your dad lost his farm during the Depression?
Well, let's see. I was probably 3. Okay, and then so I experienced Depression times. They weren't all that bad. We were all in the same boat, and we all did for one another. So I can't say it was bad times at all.
You didn't really know what poor was because
No.
all your neighbors were in the same position.
That's right, and I wasn't raising a family.
Yeah.
My dad was.
Where did you go to country school?
Yeah, I went to a one-room country school. It was on the corner of our farm, and I still think it was excellent education. Yeah.
What do you remember best about your childhood growing up on a farm? Any particular memories?
Well, yeah, the freedom, the closeness to nature. I observed nature from birds hatching out in trees to finding a nest of rabbits and where the squirrels were and things of that sort.
Did you have a creek nearby?
Yeah, sure did. Yeah. Yeah.
Many a fine time spent on the creek.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah. In fact, some of the pastures had springs that bubbled up, and back then we probably shouldn't have been doing it, but we'd drink from those springs. And but today, yes, you'd have a little trouble.
When did you first get a desire to want to fly, or what instilled it in your mind?
Well, one of the things, I guess the main thing was we had a hired man that when he was about 17, he rode a train and jumped off somewhere along up by Alburnett and started cross country looking for a job. And these were tough times. So he came to our house. Of course, my mom fixed him a meal, and he wanted to know if there's any work. My dad said, well, we can give you room and board, but I can't afford to pay you anything. So about 3 months, he worked for just room and board. And then Dad could pay him, and then got to the point where he wanted to go on to bigger things. So, and I'm rambling here, but he went out to Hunter Airport, and before he left the farm, he painted all the buildings and did a pretty good job. And he went out to Hunter Airport, and Dan wanted him to paint the hangars in the buildings. So he painted all of them, and Dan, being an excellent businessman, said, well, why don't you just teach you how to fly instead of just paying you, or maybe there was a little bit of money involved and so on. So Dan taught him how to fly, and as soon as he soloed, I think he came out over our farm and buzzed our house and landed in the pasture there. And I went down, and it was a pretty windy day, and they staked it down. And they had me watch the airplane while I sat in it and dreamed dreams and smelled the fabric and the gasoline, and it was a lifelong impression.
How old would you have been?
I was about 9 or 10, somewhere.
Very impressionable age.
Oh, yes, yeah. And flying bit me forever. I haven't gotten rid of it yet.
So when did you first get to go up in the airplane?
He took me up that day. Yeah, and
did your mother know about it?
Mother was up at the house. No, she didn't know about it. I forgot to ask her. But yeah, he took me up, flew me around, and I can remember the pattern he made. I can remember the sounds and everything, because I was, as you say, an impressionable age. Yeah. Yeah.
So, did your dad have any interest in flying, or was he just amazed that?
He was amazed that I thought that much of it, because I was born and raised to be a farmer, and wasn't supposed to be doing anything else.
So then did you go on to high school and college?
Yes,
And,
I went on to high school, and then I entered service as an aviation cadet.
Through any particular program?
Okay, Civil Air Patrol. I joined the Civil Air Patrol. Well, it was the only way you could fly back in those days. It's 43. So the only way you could fly was joining a Civil Air Patrol and flying, getting training in that manner. And Ted Saxon was one of my instructors. Ted had an airport originally where the engineering building is, the glass building at Collins. And Final Approach was right over the pond there. And I remember watching the planes. When they get over the pond, they would lose a little bit of stability. And that's when I learned about air currents from water. And so then he moved his hangar out about 2 miles north, out on right across from Lake McBride, from McBride Airport, what is now McBride Airport. So there was a pretty good-sized east-west runways and north-south runways there. So that's where I learned to fly, was in there.
Then after you learned to fly, did you go on for further training as far as the war effort was concerned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was in 43, and I went in enlisted Reserve Corps in September of that year. And then in January of 44, I went into the as an aviation cadet in service, and went through. Ultimately, I went to what's called classification, and learned I would have been a very poor navigator, but a good pilot. So then I went on to a college in Mississippi State. They called it CTD, College Training Detachment, and there we had a series of studies, and then some flights in small aircraft. And there was a stage, I was there until after VE Day, or not VE Day, but D-Day. And a great number of our class was washed out, and we had a choice of going to engineer school or armor gunner or whatnot. I just wanted to fly, so I became an armor gunner because that was the quickest way to get on an air crew. So that's where I went in 44.
So did you know what all was a tail gunner's job consisted of?
Well, I learned right away that the lifetime expectancy of a tail gunner wasn't very good.
Did you learn that after you signed up or before?
Well, we kind of knew it, but you know, those things when you're young, it doesn't bother you because it couldn't happen to you, you know, and I guess that's why the young fight wars. But, you know, B-26, Martin B-26 airplane in those days, pretty hot stuff, and we were kind of, we called them hot rocks in those days. So we had our flight jackets and our gunner's wings, and we were part of the crew.
What did you have to learn, and what did they try to teach you to be a tail gunner?
Okay, it involved quite a little bit. It involved a lot of skeet shooting, but not as we know it, rifle to the shoulder. It was a shotgun with spade grips on it. And some of the training was just, you know, stationary, and they'd shoot clay pigeons out high and low and so on. And, you know, I shot so many boxes of shells, we got so good at it that we wouldn't even need. We just got to swing the gun and knock them down. So from there, we went to that same type of a shotgun with spade grips, the back of a pickup. And then there was a circular track. We go around the circular track. And they would trip a wire, and they'd trip and out of the bushes or out of a little bitty hutch would come a clay pigeon out, and we were supposed to hit those. And we got pretty good. We learned how to lead. That was the main thing. And, you know, one of the things that baffled me right at the first, if this was the tail of the airplane and the plane is going this way, if a plane was out here starting to come in, you'd fire halfway between him and your tail rather than at him. But, of course, by the time he got there, he was running into your bullets.
You'd lead him.
Yeah. And that always baffled me. And then the closer he got to the tail, the less lead we give him then would be dead on and so on. The only thing is they didn't fly what they called a pursuit curve in the war. They were down and through. And so they taught us a lot of things that never actually would come to pass later on.
So when you become good at skeet shooting, when did they stick you in the bubble?
Okay, all right. Then we got, we did some high altitude, learn how to function with heavy clothes, oxygen mask. Let's see. And then we would not only I learned my tail gunner position, we'd learn how to fire out of the waist, or there was little tunnel guns, and the upper turret, and then out the nose. So we were capable of handling any position, but our specialty would be where we're at. Yeah.
Did they, in order to give you some target practice, did they pull targets behind other ships for you to shoot at, or to see if you could hit them?
Yeah, they would, and with stern warning that we better not fire ahead of that target. But another B-206 would pull a sleeve, and then being young and full of it, the sleeve had a heavy weight at the bottom where the sleeve was hooked on at the end of a long cable from another B-26. So we'd try and hit that heavy weight and knock that off, so that the sleeve wouldn't have any control and we could cut the mission short. But then we would fire bullets at it, and each of us would have different paint on the tips of our bullets. And then we'd come down and they would count the number of holes that you registered in.
So how did you do as far as you yourself felt? Did you become proficient at hitting a target?
Yeah, I felt pretty confident at it. In fact, I guess fortunate enough to get in on a frangible bullet type of training. And that's where we flew B-24s. And through the waist guns, we didn't have them in the turrets, but the waist guns that were handheld. A Bell P-63 King Cobra was specially manufactured for that. And it was fitted with about a 1/4-inch armor plate over the entire aircraft except for the controls. And in the nose, where the cannon generally came through the propeller, there was a light bulb. So there were sensors all over this P-63, so when you hit it with these frangible bullets, of course the bullets would disintegrate, but they would register inside the cockpit. And then the nose would light up, the bulb would light up. So that we got pretty sharp at that. That was about as realistic as you can get. And the pilots that flew the P-63s, they were screw-ups because there was always a chance of shooting the controls out, and it was very dull for them to be flying along. And I remember we used to pretend like the guns would jam quite readily with that material, that plastic material, that was a projectile. But we'd fake a jamming once in a while, so he'd pull up to see what was going on, and we'd grab the guns.
So if the gun jammed, you could unjam it?
Yeah, we'd have to.
Before going back down?
Yeah, we'd have to take it apart, and because it's kind of scrape out some of the stuff, It wasn't perfected, but it was pretty close.
Did you have to dismantle your guns and keep your own guns clean, or was that taken care of by somebody else?
Yes, no, you did yourself. I mean, you wanted to do yourself on that. And in fact, I got lucky one day on skeet and it was really creaming them. Some officers saw me and invited me to try out for the gunnery team. So that's when I got into frangible bullet gunnery. But one of our tests when we go around to different bases that had gunnery schools, we detail strip the 50 caliber, put it in a box, and I think there are 30-some pieces. And blindfolded, then we were required to feel and put them back in and fire 12 rounds without jamming the gun. And there's certain adjustments you have to make to keep it. And we got to the point where we could do it 3.5 to 4 minutes. And the reason they taught us that, because when you're up where it's freezing and everything else, and you try and fix a gun and they're after you and you can't get the gun to fire, you can detail it and feel and if you have to, and put everything back in. So,
did you fly at heights that you had to wear oxygen?
Yeah. Although on the B-26, later on in the war, they took the oxygen equipment out because they were called a medium bomber, and they would drop their bombs 10, 12,000 feet. That was it. But I flew I had other gunnery schools I went to also. Yeah.
So, Tell us about this compartment that you had to sit in. You were in the tail of the plane.
Mm-hmm.
What were you sitting in? Kind of like a glass bubble or a housing?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there was a bubble right behind the rudder, and then there was an armor plate. You could open the armor plate to reach in and charge your guns, and of course close them. And then it was all hydraulic. You had controls, kind of like a bicycle type of control, that would allow it to go in any direction you wanted. So you were sitting behind some armor plate, not nearly enough, but some. And it was a compartment. Let's see, the guys told me overseas when they flew missions, they were on their knees most of the time praying while they're shooting. But there was just a little bitty seat just had it. It wasn't for comfort, and it was pretty crowded back there.
Was this I imagine was some type of a plexiglass?
Yes.
Plastic. Was that would that stop any type of a bullet?
No.
You were very vulnerable if somebody was shooting at you.
Yeah. They said it would stop a marshmallow at 20 feet. That's about all it would do. Yeah, and it would shatter. And no plastic wouldn't do it.
A lot of people would not understand how large a 50 caliber bullet is. Mm-hmm. Approximately how?
As big around as your thumb, half an inch. Yeah, and the velocity. Now let's see, fire 600 rounds a minute. Today, that same basic 50 caliber fires well over 1,000 rounds a minute. But and it was good for up to 600 yards. Wasn't much effective after that. It started dropping off. So we had a gunnery range. We'd fly low and do some strafing. There was an old barn on this one gunnery range, and we would kind of wait, and rather than hit the targets, they'd have Mach 10 areas and Mach airplanes and so on. We'd kind of wait to shoot at that barn, and just a handheld 50, the boards would fly, and it was just awesome, the power. Now, when we got to the B-29s and so on, they had these quad 50 turrets that would literally mow down a brick building, I'm sure. So the feeling of power was awesome, just with a single 50. Yeah.
Especially at your age.
Yes.
And you were pretty proficient at shooting skeet, and to have that gun in your hand.
Yes.
Didn't try to ever shoot any ducks or geese in the air, did you?
A cow accidentally strayed on one day, and that cow didn't get out alive. And I'm sure the government paid for it. Those things happen.
Good, Ellen. Bubble that you were sitting in, was this positioned high enough on the plane that if they come in and they had to do a belly landing or their tail was too low, would you have any fear of coming in contact with the runway sitting in this?
Okay, in the tail position, you didn't have that problem. You probably were in the best place in the tail. Now, in the other aircraft, such as the B-24, if you couldn't get out of the bubble, you were done. If the hydraulics were shot out, and if there was no one there to hand crank it around so you could get up and out, you were gone. That's all there was to it. In the B-24, when they belly land, the plane would split apart right at the upper turret, and B-24 wasn't quite as I shouldn't say as heavily constructed, but it's a little more vulnerable in certain areas than the B-17. But the B-26, we always kidded each other is made out of sewer pipe, so that's where the bubble, where the ball turret, that was a vulnerable part to get out of. The plane was in a spin. To get out of it, would have been just very difficult. Yep.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, you've seen a lot of World War II war movies, the gunners shooting. The sights on these guns, were they effective, or they were just a general reference as to where your target was supposed to be?
Yeah, we had, in the latter part of the war, we got some guns that were controlled, not exactly computer controlled, but it had a built-in system where you put the light beam on the target, it would do its own deflection. But when we fired the waist guns and things like that, there's a plain old ring and sight with a bead out, like World War I, and that's what we used.
And you tried to get your target within that.
Yes, and also we could tell, when with that ring sight, when the wings of the enemy aircraft filled one of those radius of that, you knew he was going to get you and you were going to get him. So that's kind of how you judged. And then, of course, the larger the airplane, the quicker that would fill up. But they weren't the ones that were after you, it was the fighters. Yeah.
Well, let's drift back towards the Hunter Airport a little bit. Can you talk about Hunter? Tell us any tales about the Hunter Airport. Did you know Dan Hunter himself, or Dan Hunter Jr.?
Yeah, I knew Dan Hunter Jr. Not real well, but I knew him. And Dan Hunter Jr. was more on the mechanical side, although he did fly. Old Dan, I knew him. I learned about him by his language. He was pretty. He's a good flyer. He's a good businessman. Kind of crusty at times. Yeah, but I remember him. You have to remember, I was only about 10 years old at that time, 12 years old when I came in from the farm and saw some.
Did you? I'm sure you heard about Lindbergh, read about Lindbergh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did he have any make any impression on you at that age?
Yeah, he was my hero, and still is. And I, when I was in country school, fortunate enough, they had the book called We. Very simple book, I read it again here the other day, and but that really impressed me. Here was a guy with no radio, no life support. There was a few sandwiches to get, and nothing to keep you from falling asleep. No automatic pilot, doing what he did. He's still my hero. Yeah.
You're the third aviator that mentioned the fact that they were inspired by reading the book of We from Charles Lindbergh.
Is that right?
Yeah. How about the Wright brothers? Did you, as a child, know about the Wright brothers, or did you read about them in school?
Yeah, I read about them in school, and later on in life, as I understand it, the church I was married at, the United Brethren Church on 4th Avenue and 7th Street, was once, the pastor there was Wilbur and Orville Wright's father. And they they lived in the parsonage there. I knew that they're originally in Cedar Rapids, and I think that's where the father brought home that ornithopter that inspired them to go into flying, or look more into flying and so on.
When you were at the Hunter Airport, did any DC-3s fly into Hunter at that time?
Yeah, I think it was about 36 or 37. It was a short time United started flying passengers out of there. So I think about 6 o'clock at night, my cousin took me out there, because that was, it was like going down to the train station once the passenger trains pull in. Well, we went out there, and they had passengers that unloaded and loaded. And at that particular time, the DC-3 was only a couple years old. Yeah, so they were shiny, brand new. I remember the pilots. I'm sure they wouldn't be able to do it today, but when they get ready to take off, they would taxi out toward the end of the runway, and they'd taxi with the tail in the air. And they wouldn't drop it down and turn around and check the engines out or anything. They would tail in the air, they'd hit the brake and gun around, and just, really hot pilots, and just would take off and then on west. Yeah.
How about the Standard Oil Company had a plane called the Standalone. It was a tri-motor, and it was covered with a corrugated, I don't know if it would have been aluminum or steel at that time, but I do know it was covered with a corrugated.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's aluminum.
Did you ever see that fly into Hunter Airport?
Yeah, there was they had an air show there once, and there was a fellow named Ben's tri-motor, and he gave rides, and that thing was going from dawn till dusk, and they would land only about 60 miles an hour, just a real gentle old airplane. And
You don't recall what they charged per admission on that?
I think it was $1 a ride, and it was like a 12, 15-minute ride. Yeah, of course you fill them up, and that was $17, and that was a lot of money those days.
Was you ever in a position that you were able to give your folks a ride, airplane ride?
No, they never would. My mother didn't think. She just knew I was going to kill myself in the airplane. And yes, I did. I gave my dad a ride once. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time taking him around, showing him our old farm, and he got a perspective he never had before. And where he worked at that time, he retired, and he was working at Collins Radio in the Cherry Building. So we flew over there, and he just got a different perspective of what he ever saw. Yeah.
What was your dad's name?
His name was Barclay. Barclay W. Heald, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Did, I can imagine he was a little hesitant when you wanted to become a pilot and learn to fly.
Well, yeah, it was nonsense. You know, I was raised to be a farmer.
I bet he was quite proud of you, though, when you give him a ride over the farm.
Yes, yeah.
He probably didn't say so, but okay.
No, he wasn't the demonstrative type, but yes. Yeah, that's right. You got him nailed pretty good.
You had mentioned something about a gentleman by the name of Corey at Pickwick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy, I'm just not real familiar. I think it was Wendell. No, Wendell Corey was a movie star. But his name was Corey. He was a heavy-set man. He always flew with a cigar out of his mouth. I'm sure he wasn't smoking. He wasn't lit. He had a little Culver Cadet. It looked like a baby robin, a little spindly landing gear that retracted. You cranked him up. And at the Saxon Airport at that time in the spring, they didn't have much tiling in. It got pretty heavy with water in there, and so he was trying to take. I can't remember his first name, but he's trying to take off on that, and he just couldn't get up speed enough. He's a little bit on the heavy side, just couldn't quite get the plane off. We always sweated him out because he wouldn't cut back until he got pretty close to the fence. Yeah.
Do you ever recall when a B-17 made an emergency landing north of Lisbon?
Oh, sure do. I spent 3 days down there and didn't go to school all those 3 days.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us about this. I have a friend that is from Lisbon,
Uh-huh.
and he often tells the tale about what a great event this was.
Yes, it really was. And well, it was north a little west of Lisbon. I can't remember what farm. I have a paper, part of the newspaper that showed pictures of it and everything else. That was in 1943. But yeah, they got lost and they lost an engine. And this is a pretty good sized field, so they landed the B-17 there. And remember the crew went into town and bought baseball bat and baseball. We played the ball with them and so on. And yeah, we'd come. Of course, I was going to Springville High School, so I would slip down there and spend all day talking to them. And they wouldn't, of course, let us close to the airplane. They had the bomb sight in there and supposed to guard it with the gun and so on.
That was the Norden bomb site?
Yes, uh-huh.
And I understand they had a 24-hour guard on the plane?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And then ultimately they brought in a new engine and installed it right there. They had a tripod they brought with them, installed it, and took off. And
what time of the year was this? Would the ground been muddy or soft? Or?
Yes, it was soft. But I remember them digging and pushing the plane down into a rut, so that I suppose in case the wind came up or something like that a little bit. But it wasn't terribly soft. It didn't sink in that much. But it was in spring. It's like about May, March, about April or May, somewhere in there.
How old were the crew? Were they
kids?
Kids.
They looked old to us now, but
Yeah.
they were about. If there was one 20, 21 years old, he'd been an old man. Yeah.
That had to have been a very, very large plane sitting out in the middle of a farm field.
Huge, yeah. And it was a secret plane, we weren't supposed to see too much of it. Yeah, yes.
I can imagine that was quite an event when they finally started it up and went to take off. I imagine there was quite a crowd standing around.
Well, I'm not sure. I wasn't there when that happened. I just don't know what happened. But I would imagine there were, there was plenty of sightings going on. Yeah.
Did any of your friends that you went to school with, did they have any interest like you did in aviation, flying?
Not in my class. Jack Draker, who came along a little later on in life, but he was an 8th grader when I left there. But he went he went to Dan Hunter's and learned to fly, and ended up flying F-86s and F-84s. They called him the Hog. I can remember that. He was real interested in it. Yeah, and he was very active in it. Yeah.
While you were at Hunter Airport, tell us about some of the planes you may have seen out there, or may have impressed you at the time. Or
yeah, sure did. They had a Stinson Reliant, which is a beautiful airplane. It was a gull wing, and I don't know how familiar you are with aircraft, but the gull wing had a beautiful elliptical type shape, and then it had a thin cord at the start, and the cord became thicker, and then on farther out. Had the name of Cedar Rapids Gazette on the side of it, and I guess Cedar Rapids Gazette used them to fly to pick up news and things of that sort. Now, they also had a couple other aircraft there. There was called the Aerosport. Ford Motor Company built it. It had a Ford engine in it. And I think that's about the time the Ford V8 engine, I think it was kind of and one was had a canopy on, another one was just open cockpit, side by side, real high dihedral. I haven't seen one since.
You mentioned a very high dihedral. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Well, that's where rather than wings being level like this, they would be have some dihedral, and that would provide stability. Fighter planes had very little. When you had large dihedral, then the maneuverability was cut back. Where you're pretty much straight dihedral, then you had real ability to maneuver around fast response. So that's why they had it in. Yeah, the more safer the airplane, the more dihedral you have in it, as I understand it. Okay.
You had mentioned the fact in training, in shooting the gun, that you used, you shot a lot of clay pigeons. Mm-hmm. Did you, later in life, did you continue that hobby of ever shooting clay pigeons with the shotgun?
No, I never did. I guess I shot so many boxes of shells that that's pretty much over it. No, I never did pursue that, although I would, if I had the capability of going someplace, I probably would do it. Yeah, yeah.
How about did you keep your pilot license up?
Yes, I did up until I was 55, and I had open heart surgery, and I could have. Mayo said I could get my license back again in time, but there comes a time in life where you quit doing some things you did when you were young, and so I quit.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you fly often up until that time? Did you fly often?
Not real often. I flew for the Civil Air Patrol quite a little bit and flew some missions for them. All total, probably don't have much more than 900 hours. But this is off and on through quite a number of years, from my age 17 until, or 16, until I was 50, 55, yeah.
Later in life, did you have the opportunity to fly your family any place, or?
Yeah, went down to Texas, Dallas, and would tell a story of myself. Flew down there in a Piper Cruiser, Super Cruiser, 100 horsepower, pretty big airplane. It's 1946. I had an old map. Didn't list all the airports, but it got down to Dallas, all right, and the field I used to work at. And flying back, I had such a tailwind. Now that's about 800 air miles, I think. Had such a tailwind, I figured I wouldn't have to stop and get any gas. So I kept going, and I was counting the rivers, but I forgot about the Iowa River. So there was a river, and I looked at this town. I didn't recognize the town, so I landed along the highway and stopped the truck and asked him where it was. He said, well, this is Marengo. So then the ceiling got quite low, and I probably shouldn't have been flying too much.
Was your wife with you?
Yes, she was.
Was she a religious person?
Yeah. But bless her heart, she was totally unaware of the predicament that I was in. Yeah. So, and then when we took off again, went out the airport, we buzzed the airport pretty good, and the civil air inspector was out there, and he said, I'm getting out of here. Anybody that's that crazy flying this kind of weather, I don't want to have him hit me. But I wasn't that bad, but we still had the right number of feet, but I was ready to stop anytime, yeah.
In taking your training out to Hunter Airport, did you ever have to take an FAA instructor or someone that was certified before you finally got your license? Did you have to take them up and show your proficiency in flying, or?
Yeah, this was at Saxon Airport. Is where it took, and yeah, I had to get approved for a student, but I didn't get my privates till after the war. So after the war, yes, and that's when I was flying down to Dallas, and I had a check ride and had to do quite a few things, cut the engine and make sure I could find an open place where I was at, and make sure I knew where the wind was coming from and things of that sort, and making engine out landings. Of course, in those days, we'd cut the engine entirely and land without, same as a dead stick landing. Today, you keep certain RPMs all the way around, but then that's the way they taught you.
Did this individual, did they live here in Cedar Rapids at the airport, or were they stationed at the airport, or did they come in from someplace like Des Moines and check you out?
Well, they lived. Now down in Dallas, no, there were civil air inspectors down there. Yeah, CAA inspectors. Yeah, CAB, I think they called it then, Civil Air Board. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did any of your family, did you have sons that showed any interest in wanting to be following in their dad's footsteps, or?
Yeah, I have a son. He's interested in aviation, but not the point of flying or wanting to fly. In fact, he doesn't really care to fly too much. His interest is sports, baseball in particular, and he's excelled very well at that. So, and my grandson, I had no hope for him flying. So he's sports. In fact, he's with Coe College, and right now he's down in Florida, so the assistant coach with the baseball team. So
maybe after they have the chance to view this interview, they'll see what they're missing out on.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah.
Don, the History Center wants to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us from your early aviation years. We truly appreciate it.
Well,
thank you very much.
It's real good to rethink old times, and thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
The History Center thanks you again.
Good. Yeah.